I'm Ed Cameron. I run a business called Whippet Bus Company over in Cambridgeshire. I'm going to talk a little bit about depot allocation. I'm going to talk about what happens sort of behind the scenes to make a business work. So if I set the scene a little bit, Whippet, some of you may have heard of. It's a fairly modest company, started in 1919. It was a converted ambulance was the first bus that we ran, long before my time, of course. And we ran from a thatched cottage in a village called Gravely. That kind of sets the scene of where we've come from. So it was a family-owned business for 95 years, bought in 2014 by Tower Transit, and now sits under the Ascendal Group sort of family of companies. We've come a long way since then. So a third of our fleet is now electric. It's one of our universal buses that we run on a contract for the University of Cambridge. We have a modern depot just north of Cambridge, and we run 5 other routes in West Cambridgeshire, so mostly under our own brand, but also the Tiger brand for the Combined Authority. Combined Authority is interesting, and franchising is part of our sort of conversation day by day now, of course. We see about 25% year-on-year passenger growth on our rural network, which is quite unusual for a rural bus network, and certainly in Cambridgeshire is quite unusual. Because of the ownership structure of Ascendal, we're quite an agile business. So I introduced tap-on, tap-off ticketing 2 years ago. We're still the only operator in the region to offer that, introduced on an entirely commercial basis, and we see huge customer benefit from that. We also run an autonomous bus. We have very low staff turnover. We've got a number of people who've been with the business for very, very long periods of time. So this summer, I've awarded 3 people long service awards, so 75 years between them. But the business isn't without its challenges. So when I started 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, it was in the kind of post-COVID challenges, we shall say. So recruitment and retention was a huge issue, and operationally, that makes it very difficult to run a good bus service. There were some historic challenges in the business from quite significant contract changes. So we used to be a National Express operator. That suddenly ended during COVID. And operationally, what it meant is actually our performance wasn't what it should be. And we kind of ran our business from the stationery cupboard using a kind of multitude of highlighters to code internally what was happening and inform our business, make operational decisions and try and report on things. And it didn't really work. So our control office is what I often say the biggest cog in the business. It's the thing that joins together engineering, recruitment, health and safety, and everything else, all the kind of commercial and scheduling decisions as well. It can make a business work really well, but they need the right tools to make it work well, otherwise it doesn't work. The control office needs absolutely razor-sharp accuracy. They can't have margin for error. And as my boss used to say in a previous role, you've got to have the right tools for doing it. That used to be one of our tools. So every week we would print off what we called the sheets. It was about 10 A4 pages, so a copy of every rota, a variation sheet. And then we would highlight and Tipp-Ex and highlight and scribble and highlight and Tipp-Ex and try to make the business function like this. And it's a little bit embarrassing sort of sharing this. This is our last variation sheet we printed in February this year, actually. The surprising thing was we had resorted to doing this even though we had a system, a DAS system in place in the control office. We had an electronic system, but it wasn't trusted, hadn't been set up properly. And it's one of those systems, if you don't put the right things in, you'll never get the stuff out. So we needed to kind of rethink that quite dramatically. So Penny and the team at Velocity, or Omni as I will still call them forever and a day. We had long conversations about possible solutions and how we might be able to move things on. And there were really kind of 5 deciding factors in the decision that we made to move to OmniDAS. So our payroll process was convoluted, shall we say. Now, payroll is really important for a bus company. You've got to pay people for doing their job, and actually people get frustrated if they're underpaid. Never known someone get frustrated to be overpaid, but there you go. But it's important. And like most bus companies, we do that every week. And like every bus company, everyone's pay is different every week. And it was taking our team about 4 days, split between 2 or 3 people, to do that. So it's quite involved. And we were looking for something that had less administration time spent on it and resulted in payroll being done without any errors. Because that's a big part of your staff retention piece, actually. If people are paid what they should be, it's kind of one of the basics, but it's important. The other thing we were looking for was a good user interface. So this is the interface between my control team, who have a variety of IT skills, from good to limited, and we needed something they could understand, that was logical, that was intuitive, and they could just get to know very quickly and get to trust. I was looking for something that was error-free. So the number of times we used to double book a duty, or someone would forget to write something in a box and would miss a duty, and you'd have 2 early drivers turn up for an early and a late duty, and guess what? One of them didn't run. So we needed something that fixed that. And I also wanted to give our drivers visibility about what they were doing, and it comes back to that retention piece. So drivers needed some control over how they managed their time. You know, could they look on a rota on a calendar and see what duty they're doing in 4 weeks, so they can book a dentist appointment for themselves or a medical appointment for their daughter? Could they book holiday? Could they do rest day swaps? All those things that people want to do. And of course, what they used to do was ring up, and our control team would tap away and look on the sheets and find out, yes, you're on duty 4 that week. Okay, so empowering drivers with a little bit of information, enabling them to kind of balance their work-life thing was important. And actually, really fundamentally behind all of this was the desire to have much better visibility. So for my senior leadership team in the business, they needed better visibility and a good set of reports that they could say, actually, we're running the business well. You know, we've covered everything, we've covered it efficiently, we've got the right amount of spares, or we've got too many or not quite enough. And then that makes, we can then make informed business decisions with that information. So the overriding thing was to give our control office control of the operation again. We've had DAS for nearly a year now. It was introduced at Christmas, New Year last year. We printed our last sheets in February this year. And actually, we've never looked back. So I had one of my control team said, well, what's the backup when DAS doesn't work? We need this bit of paper. You know, someone will need it when they do payroll on a Monday morning. I said, no, we need to move away from that. And if I went in today and said, well, we're going to start printing worksheets again, and you need to get your highlighters out, they'd all laugh at me. And behind all of this, behind the kind of operational mechanics of what DAS does for the business and enables us to run things better, was the confidence I wanted the SLT to have to remove all the kind of manual frustration caused and time wasted. And actually, they can now get on and run the business efficiently and do all the other things they're supposed to do. So they've been released from all that kind of frustration and time spent. So there's actually business benefit across the team there. So there's a little insight into Whippet, little insight into DAS. It used to be an incredibly manual, inefficient process. DAS has kind of slotted into our business. It fits in with our schedules team very well, and I'd never look back.